Can you be both the worst and the best in Hollywood at once? The guy the whole industry laughs at, and also the king of the ratings, pulling in millions. Adam Sandler is a riddle. To some, a symbol of cringe, a kid in baggy shorts who never grew up. To others, a comedy king everyone loves. For years, critics have treated him as a mistake. Jack and Jill swept every Razzie there is, the anti-Oscars. The prizes handed to the worst films of the year. Sandler took home the statues for both Worst Actor and Worst Actress, since he also played his own on-screen twin. And yet, audiences keep watching him, quite the opposite. When Hollywood mocked him, Netflix bet everything on one card and won. In 2020, the platform revealed that viewers had spent 2 billion hours watching Sandler. That's like one person sitting in front of a screen for over 228,000 years. So, who really is Adam Sandler, and how did he outplay all of Hollywood, coming out on top and earning over $3 billion on films the critics laughed at? Back in the 80s, nobody was betting the unassuming Adam Sandler would become a star. He was born in 1966 in Brooklyn, the youngest child of an electrician and a teacher. He grew up in a small town, far from the glow of Hollywood. Young Adam didn't stand out, apart from a love of goofing around. He first hit the stage in Boston at 17, during an open night at a comedy club. The performance went, to put it gently, pretty badly. Sandler got so nervous, he'd forget his lines and grab a guitar to save himself. I was terribly nervous every time. I'd walk on stage and my mind went blank. The guitar gave my hands something to do. That's how Adam described it years later. That guitar later became his trademark. It was stand-up that led him to Saturday Night Live, the legendary American forge of comedians. There, he met the most important friends of his life, the people he'd stick with through thick and thin: Chris Rock, David Spade, Rob Schneider. This crew of young comedians wrote sketches together, yelled into mics, and partied through the night. Around then, Sandler also befriended an unassuming screenwriter, a guy he'd shared a dorm room with in college. These buddies would soon build their own empire, but for now, each was still clawing for a place in show business. Back then, a lot of older viewers didn't get the Sandler phenomenon. His humor was very specific, childish, absurd, often be it on weird voices and silly songs. For part of the audience, he simply wasn't funny. In polls near the end of 1995, Saturday Night Live viewers named Sandler the weakest link on the show. NBC decided to shake up the cast, and at 28, Sandler was let go, along with his close friend Chris Farley. Years later, Adam recalled how much that stung. He didn't have an easy start, and he admitted that out of frustration, he could be flat out unbearable to those close to him. "I acted like an asshole," he said plainly. He had to learn fast not to take it all personally. His first films drew terrible reviews. The critics crushed him, and he tried to tune it all out. In interviews, he admitted he'd rather not read reviews at all, because otherwise you could just lose your mind. Still, Sandler wasn't alone in his fight. His friends' loyalty proved crucial, because after getting cut from the show, Adam focused on films and immediately started bringing his buddies onto his projects. His debut leading role in the comedy Billy Madison was co-written by that same former roommate, screenwriter Tim Herlihy. The film was an absurd story about a grown man repeating elementary school. Critics leveled it, but young audiences bought the vibe. For fans in their 20s, the goofy Billy Madison became a cult symbol of 90s carefree fun. And crucially, Sandler's Saturday Night Live pals showed up in small parts, including Chris Farley as a furious school bus driver. Even then, Sandler was showing he'd drag his people along with him. When he scored his first box office hit with Happy Gilmore, the story of a hockey player playing golf, he again surrounded himself with familiar faces. Sandler knew he'd survive in show business only because he had trusted people beside him. In Hollywood, where friendships are often fake, he built a pack of real buddies. Judd Apatow, who'd later become a famous comedy director, shared a cramped Los Angeles apartment with Sandler in the 90s. "We were both starting out comedians, and it was obvious right away that Adam was 100,000 times funnier than me," Apatow recalled. He told how Sandler spent whole days calling from their shared phone, pulling goofy pranks on hotlines. He had so much energy, he had to burn it off somewhere. These guys backed each other up, each going his own way. As Sandler made it in film, he never forgot his old buddies. You could say loyalty became his core strategy. Before long, it would grow into a business system, the one spiteful voices, called the Sandler Mafia. There's an anecdote in Hollywood that if you become Adam Sandler's friend, you've got work for life. And sure enough, over the years, a steady group of actors, writers, and directors formed around him, one he works with on nearly every film. The industry called this informal group the Sandler Squad, and some critics snidely call it the Happy Madison Mafia. Happy Madison is the name of Sandler's production company, founded in 1999. From the start, its mission was making films within their own circle. Director Dennis Dugan, who shot many of his hits, said flat out that working on a Sandler film is like a family vacation. On the grown-up set, friends made a movie by day and whole families partied together at night. Dugan remembered that time as one of the best vacation memories of their lives. Adam Sandler himself isn't embarrassed by this setup, he is proud of it. He says outright that he doesn't make films to please critics. His ideas for new films reportedly come from phone calls with his buddies. When they hit on something, he calls everyone, pitches the idea, and pulls the crew together with no auditions. Viewers like seeing the same gang, and Sandler gets to do what he wants. He's earned billions on his films and later became the king of Netflix. But this model has its price too, because when a closed group holds power too long, friction shows up. Not everyone survived in this arrangement, and over time people started saying the films were getting weaker and more predictable. Before we get to that, it's worth backing up a moment, because for a long time Hollywood watched all this with a mix of envy and disbelief. From the very start of Sandler's career, there were two parallel streams of opinion about him. 90s reviewers called his films offensively dumb. Adam became a symbol of Hollywood hackwork, movies made to a single formula. They also knocked him for being lazy. Peter Travers, one of the best-known American film critics, wrote snidely that watching one Sandler film after another felt like watching first draft scripts filmed without a single revision. Others sneered that Sandler was shooting the most expensive home movies in history, since his productions looked like vacation goofing around, recorded on the studio's dime. The mockery peaked with Jack and Jill, which scored a mere 3% positive reviews on a popular site, so the film was literally destroyed. No surprise, Sandler swept a record 10 Razzies for that one. Nobody before or since has won in every single category of that anti-award, which shows the scale of the critical lynching. And yet viewers kept wanting more Sandler. His early goofy 90s comedies turned out to be a generational phenomenon. Sandler created a type of hero that spoke to a broad audience. The eternal boy, a simpleton with a heart of gold, who mocks the pompous and wins through honesty and friendship. That pattern, the everyman who outplays the rich, ran through many of his films, and interestingly, it hit fertile social ground. Sandler fit perfectly into the American fantasy of the ordinary guy who beats the elites. A guy with heart instead of sense, a total mess. But in the end, he wins, as one columnist put it. A hero who ignores the experts, breaks the rules, and still takes the podium. And there was something to it, because in his films it was the lawyers and doctors shown as pompous and out of touch, while the plain, ordinary guy, scatterbrained, stubborn, honest, got to be the hero. And that's exactly what worked, because these stories were like fairy tales for grown-ups. Sociology aside, viewers just wanted to laugh, and Sandler gave them that. However much critics rolled their eyes, his family films like Big Daddy and rom-coms like 50 First Dates were box office hits. Even when reviewers handed out scores of 0, the crowds packed the theaters. This clash peaked in 2010 with the comedy Grown Ups, about a pack of childhood friends. It got mocked by critics and at the same time earned over $160 million. In the US, it was one of the year's most popular comedies. The contrast was stark. Papers wrote, "Stupid, a waste of time," and people were thrilled. Sandler was well aware of this war over opinion, and he ostentatiously ignored it. When the 2020 Oscar nominations were counted and Sandler got no nod for his drama Uncut Gems, he commented in his own way, mocking the whole chase for recognition. In an interview with Howard Stern, he joked that if they wouldn't give him an Oscar, he'd come back and deliberately make a movie so awful everyone would choke. Over time, though, critics started to see Sandler differently. Once the years of his dumbest antics were behind him and a new generation of reviewers grew up on his films, a fresh take emerged. People started to notice that under all the crude humor, Sandler's films actually had heart and authenticity because he was working alongside real friends. His old comedies had become nostalgic classics for the viewers who grew up on them. And his 2023 family film, the one starring his own daughters, shocked everyone by pulling in a full 96% positive reviews. Suddenly, it turned out Sandler could make things critics respected, without losing the love of his audience. But before that happened, there had to be a turning point in his life, something that pushed him to change and reach for more ambitious roles. By the turn of the century, Adam Sandler was rich and famous of his comedies. But people still saw him as a clown telling dumb jokes. Plenty predicted he'd burn out fast, like comedians who play the same character forever. But in his private life, something happened that changed him. In 2003, Adam's father, Stanley Sandler, died. After a long fight with lung cancer, for Adam, then 37, it was a devastating blow. His father was his hero. Sandler repeatedly called him his idol, saying he only wanted to be the man his dad was. Friends said Adam grew quieter and more withdrawn for a while. And if you look at his films, the father and son theme was always running through them. Even the goofy comedies like Billy Madison or Happy Gilmore touched on the bond with a father. Billy wants to prove to his dad that he's worth something. Happy remembers his late golfer father. But the first real sign of change was a film made just before his father's death, Punch Drunk Love from 2002, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. It caught everyone off guard. Sandler in an art house film, playing an introverted salesman wrestling with his emotions. Anderson, a respected director, handed him a role completely unlike anything his fans were used to, and Sandler carried it brilliantly. On screen, he showed tenderness, anger, and sorrow in a way that stunned even his own fans. Critics couldn't believe their own eyes. This goofy little clown could actually act for real. For that role, Sandler earned his first ever Golden Globe nomination. He didn't win, but the message went out. A real dramatic talent was buried in this man. Sandler admitted the role scared him. After watching Anderson's earlier film, Magnolia, he was sure he couldn't measure up, and yet the director pulled something new out of him. The film wasn't a hit, but it became a milestone in how people saw Sandler. Soon after came a family tragedy, his father's passing in September 2003, a loss that surely shaped Adam's choices. He began searching for roles that would let him show real emotion, instead of just hiding behind that silly goofy mask. In 2004, in the comedy drama Spanglish, he played a more restrained, down-to-earth character, though the film as a whole turned out pretty average. And in 2006, he went on to make a film called Click. It was sold as a comedy about a magical TV remote, but the ending turns surprisingly moving. There, Sandler's character lives through the loss of his father. The scene where the son arrives too late to say goodbye to his dying father moved even the most cynical viewers. Many only later realized Sandler had poured his own grief into that scene. After 2003, the theme of losing a father or raising a child alone shows up more and more in his films. Something was maturing inside him, as if the comic behind the mask finally showed his true face, full of sadness. Privately, Sandler admitted he thought about his father constantly then. In the film, there's a confrontation with his character's father-in-law, where Sandler breaks down in desperate tears. On set, the cast and crew were stunned to see how much real pain he let out. Despite these detours into drama, Sandler never gave up comedy. He kept weaving his more ambitious projects together with his old style, but the world was starting to see that he wasn't just a comedian, he was an actor with serious range. He realized himself that he could step out of his comfort zone now and then. After 2010, alongside his favorite lighthearted directors and buddies, he added new collaborations with independent filmmakers. The real breakthrough finally came in 2019. Sandler landed a role that fully tapped into both of his sides, the comedian and the serious dramatic actor. This one was Uncut Gems, directed by the Safdie brothers. Sandler threw himself into the role of a gambling-addicted New York jeweler, a character at once repulsive and magnetic, hilarious and tragic. The film is a relentless thriller, with Sandler on screen almost the entire time. It was something almost nobody saw coming. At 53, Sandler delivered the role of his life. The critics who had scored him for years fell to their knees. Hypnotic, dazzling, Oscar-worthy. That was the kind of praise now pouring in. They wrote that Sandler had returned to form, though the real irony was that he'd never once shown this level of acting mastery before. For Uncut Gems, he collected a pile of critics' awards and nominations for serious honors. The whole internet was buzzing that he deserved an Oscar nomination, but Sandler didn't seem to care. At the Film Independent Gala accepting his award, he gave a hilarious speech, laughing at all of Hollywood and at himself. The audience, including a lot of celebrated filmmakers, gave him a standing ovation, and this moment happened to line up with a real generational shift. In pop culture, Sandler had become a kind of Uncle Adam, the older guy everyone knows from their childhood. In hindsight, he started getting real credit for the impact he'd had on American comedy. In 2023, he received the Mark Twain Prize, basically a Nobel for comedy. At the gala in Washington, where a crowd of stars praised his achievements, Sandler, with his usual modesty, joked about whether Mark Twain would even be there. Accepting the statue, he said it was really his friends and family who made him who he is. He thanked his brother, who talked him into acting, his buddies, who became his brothers, and his wife and daughters, for giving him a strange, wild sense of confidence every single day. It was a beautiful moment of recognition. And what's fascinating is Sandler reached this peak without giving up his lifestyle or the way he worked. He didn't suddenly trade his circle for prestige directors and move into a mansion to sip wine with intellectuals. After that success, he kept making his usual films with the same people. Just like he promised in that joke, that's exactly what he did. His next film, after Uncut Gems, was Hubie Halloween. A goofy Netflix comedy about a weirdo saving his small town on Halloween, packed with burp jokes. Critics turned up their noses again, but viewers watched it in droves. Sandler made it clear he wouldn't play the serious actor forever. Every so often he'll surprise you with some ambitious role, and then he goes right back to being himself. To understand the Sandler phenomenon, you have to look behind the scenes of his film factory, Happy Madison Productions. It's more than a corporation cranking out movies. It's a way of life for Sandler and his crew. Today, the company has more than 50 feature films to its name, mostly comedies starring Adam or carrying his name. A Sandler film set feels a lot like summer camp. Adam openly admitted that when he's picking new projects, he goes by the location. On Jimmy Fallon's show, Laughing, he confirmed the rumors. Yeah, ever since shooting 50 First Dates in Hawaii, he tries to set scripts in spots that double as vacation destinations. Picture this, Kimmel says. You're deciding on a film and thinking, I'd love to shoot it somewhere I could take a vacation, like Africa. Sandler jumped in without hesitating. Yes. And sure enough, his 2014 film Blended was set at a luxury resort in South Africa, where Sandler took the entire crew on safari. Just Go With It got the picture-perfect fake Hawaii, Grown Ups got an idyllic New England lake, and you could keep going. People joke it's the best-paid travel club around, but it's hard to blame him. Who among us wouldn't want to work like that? Sandler found a loophole, and since his films make money anyway, nobody stops him from shooting wherever he likes. On set, there's this easygoing family atmosphere. Wives, husbands, kids are usually welcome. Grown Ups was shot over the summer, so the cast showed up with their families and spent the whole time together by the lake. Everybody knew each other well, so the work went fast, and after the day's shooting, they'd fire up the grill and play basketball. Basketball, it turns out, is Sandler's favorite off-screen pastime. Almost everywhere he shoots, he sets up games. Word is, he's famous for wandering onto some random court in New York or wherever and joining the kids playing there during breaks between takes. Sandler makes sure the work stays fun. He says he pays his people generously, often above market rates, to keep everyone together. That way, they've got no reason to leave. Happy Madison also became a forge for a specific type of humor. The films have a recognizable style. They feature a lot of improvisation, inside jokes, and sometimes a deliberate wink at the viewer. For example, in Grown Ups, there's a scene where the characters look at old childhood photos. It's actually a real snapshot of a young Adam Sandler from the 80s, which delighted the fans who knew the trivia. Little touches like these make viewers feel like part of the crew, provided, of course, they follow Sandler's work. Naturally, all of this sometimes means repetition, because how many times can you laugh at the same thing? But Sandler doesn't seem to mind. Worth noting, Happy Madison wasn't limited to productions with Sandler himself. His company also made films for his buddies, often with Adam nowhere in the cast, though he'd usually turn up somewhere, even just in a cameo. These films often drew terrible reviews and did just okay, but Sandler stubbornly financed them to give his friends a shot at the spotlight. One of the bigger flops was Bucky Larson, Born to be a Star, a film made specifically for Nick Swardson, where he played a loser trying to become a porn star. It even topped the anti-triumph of Jack and Jill, pulling in 0% positive reviews. And still, Sandler took it on the chin and kept promoting Swardson in his projects. Over the years, the Happy Madison formula had to adapt to changes in the film industry. When the era of streaming and home theater arrived, Sandler sensed the opportunity coming. His comedies, though still profitable, started performing worse in theaters. Around 2013-2014, viewers would rather watch superheroes, and critics had already completely written off every new production with the Happy Madison logo. That's when Sandler made a move that turned out to be a strategic masterstroke. He struck a pact with Netflix. But before we get into the Netflix era, it's worth mentioning that the Sandler crew had its share of conflicts too, so we don't leave too perfect a picture. As happens in any family, there were betrayals here as well. The loudest rift involved Rob Schneider. Adam started out with him on Saturday Night Live, and later Rob regularly appeared in Happy Madison films. But suddenly, around 2013, fans noticed Schneider had vanished from the cast of the Grown Ups sequel. His character doesn't show up in the second film, even though all the other buddies came back. What happened? Schneider explained it himself in an interview. He admitted he sat it out for two reasons: money and a packed schedule. He had his own TV show at the time, his wife had just had a baby, and the studio didn't offer a fee good enough to drop his other commitments. "They're making Grown Ups 2 without me, a mistake," Schneider joked on the radio. He added half seriously that they should have paid him a pile of money. It sounds pretty bitter, but the film did fine without Schneider, and Nick Swardson took his spot in the pack. He played the brother of Rob's character, but the rumors of an alleged feud were denied. Sandler and Schneider stayed friends and later worked together again, which showed there was no terrible war between them. Still, the fact is, Schneider dropped out of the crew's front line for a while. Maybe he came back because his own career had stalled. He'd had a few slip-ups and got entangled in controversy. He got flack, among other things, for his anti-vaccine remarks. Another minor friction involved creators outside the pack, who sometimes complained about the Happy Madison style. One example is what happened on the set of The Ridiculous Six from 2015, Sandler's first comedy for Netflix, a Western parody. During filming, several Native American extras walked off the set in protest. They felt the script contained humor that was offensive toward Native people. For instance, strange names for the Native characters and crude stereotypes. It was quite a scandal. The media wrote that Sandler was shooting a racist Western. Adam stayed quiet at first, but eventually addressed it, calling the whole thing a misunderstanding. The outrage, he said, came from taking certain things out of context. He asked people to judge the film as a whole, since his intent was to poke fun at white cowboys and the native characters in the story are positive. In other words, the classic "it's satire, not racism" defense. But back to the story. That explanation didn't convince everyone, because some felt Sandler simply didn't get why certain jokes might be inappropriate. In the end, the film succeeded on the platform anyway, and Sandler wasn't exactly discouraged by the incident, but it was a warning that the family humor of Happy Madison could sometimes brush up against territory others found offensive. In an era of greater sensitivity around race and culture, Sandler's style was sometimes criticized as immature and out of step with the new times. Within Sandler's own crew, though, loyalty ruled above everything else. And if any conflicts ever came up, they were handled quietly, behind closed doors. Those who left did so more for personal reasons than out of conflict. Sometimes a career turned elsewhere, sometimes someone settled into the shadows. But Sandler is known for never burning bridges. That's why his Mafia has lasted almost 3 decades, in an industry where most arrangements don't hold up even a few years. After the success of Uncut Gems, it might have seemed Sandler would now turn only to ambitious cinema and become a regular fixture at the Oscars. But he had other plans. He returned to his safe harbor, but you could see he'd picked up new creative energy. In 2020, he signed a contract extension with Netflix. In 2022, he surprised viewers with the sports film Hustle, where he played an NBA scout who discovers a gifted basketball player. The film was very warmly received. People praised Sandler's authentic performance, and as a huge basketball fan, he got to blend his passion with his work. Hustle earned 93% positive reviews, becoming one of the best-rated projects of his career. Critics started joking that maybe it wasn't a coincidence. The less Sandler forces the funny, the better he comes off. But Sandler doesn't really analyze it that way. He just takes whatever he happens to feel like. One time he wants a vacation with his buddies, so he makes an action comedy in Mallorca. Another time he gets to live a dream and play alongside NBA legends on set. And in 2023, Sandler did one more thing. He returned to the stand-up stage. He set off on a US tour, testing new material, and the result was a comedy special that landed on Netflix a year later. It's like closing the loop. Sandler started as an insecure comic with a guitar, and now, 30 years on, he triumphantly returns to stand-up, this time a master of his craft. What's more, Sandler became an accidental style icon for younger generations. In the TikTok age, young people discovered his old-school ease. In 2024, word spreads across the internet that Gen Z has declared Adam Sandler a fashion inspiration. His usual outfit, baggy knee-length shorts, a big hoodie or t-shirt, and sneakers became a viral trend. Young women started pairing oversized men's clothes with dressier pieces, calling the look Madame Sandler. Sandler commented on it disarmingly in a magazine. "I just wear dumb clothes. I don't know. I don't think about what I put on," he replied when asked about being a fashion guru for Gen Z. He always went for comfort and authenticity, and paradoxically, that's what won over a new generation, one that's had enough of all the contrived Instagram outfits. In a world of red carpets, Sandler is still himself. A guy in a tracksuit who'll throw on a suit for a gala now and then, but soon enough goes right back to his favorite outfit. The fact is, Adam Sandler has everything today: the industry's respect, the public's love, and money. In 2023, Forbes once again placed him among the top-earning actors. Thanks to his Netflix deals, he made $73 million in a single year. For years, Hollywood underrated him, so he built his own mini-Hollywood. And by the time the Dream Factory finally realized what a diamond it had under its nose, he'd long since stopped needing their approval. The story of Adam Sandler is definitely movie material. While critics mocked his every step, he laughed last, counting up the ticket sales and the viewership. When the industry was writing him off, he signed a golden contract with Netflix and opened the door to streaming for other stars. He didn't change for the film industry, rather the industry had to change its approach to him. Sandler never cared about applause from the elites. To some, he'll always be a symbol of goofy comedy, to others, an icon of authenticity in the cynical world of show business. Or maybe both, because this is a guy who in one scene screams with an over-the-top face, and in the next can act in a way that grips you by the throat. And that's the most beautiful thing in this whole story, that despite such enormous success, all the awards and influence, he stayed true to himself and loyal to the people close to him. This is called Lemon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in just a moment.